Greetings everyone and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elite members of the channel, thank you so much for your love and dedication of the channel and myself. I cannot put it into words as I've said time and time again. Thank you. Without further ado, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from those ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Paranormal Encounters. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. The year was 2014, and I was a telecoms engineer. My days a monotonous blur of crawling through dusty attics and cramped crawl spaces to install or repair phone lines. It was a job that took me into the bones of buildings, places most people never see, places that hold secrets in their shadows. That morning started like any other. The weak November light barely cutting through the fog as I loaded my van with tools and testers. But something felt off, a faint unease that clung to me like damp air. I ignored it. I had a job to do. My next assignment came through. It was unusual. A 20-line installation in a single location. Not the typical 1 or 2-line residential fix I was used to. These big jobs usually went to specialized teams. But I shrugged it off, thinking it might be a welcome change to linger in one place rather than darting across town. I called the contact center, and a curt voice informed me that either the caretaker or a manager would meet me at the site to explain the requirement. The address was unfamiliar, tucked away in an older part of the city where the streets seemed to twist in on themselves. When I arrived, the building loomed before me, a hulking relic from the 1920s, its brick facade stained with decades of grime. The windows stared down like empty eyes, and the air around it felt heavy, as if the place itself was holding its breath. I grabbed my tool bag and tester, the weight of them grounding me as I stepped inside. The lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with the musty scent of neglect. A receptionist sat behind a worn desk, her smile tight and fleeting. She told me the building had once been a nursing home, abandoned for years before being repurposed into offices for small, nondescript businesses. Her words were casual, but her eyes darted nervously toward the back of the room, where a heavy door stood, secured with a numbered padlock. 2 managers arrived shortly after. A man and a woman, their faces pale and drawn, as if they hadn't slept in days. They led me to the padlocked door, explaining that the cables I needed were likely in the cellar. "That's all we know," the woman said, her voice clipped, her fingers twitching at her side. I asked about the caretaker, hoping for someone with actual knowledge of the building's wiring. But they exchanged a glance that made my skin prickle. "He's ill," the man said curtly. "Won't be back until tomorrow." They gave me the access code, and the door creaked open, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. The cellar was a void. The pendulum light hanging from the ceiling barely flickered, casting weak pools of yellow that did little to push back the gloom. The air was cold, damp, and carried a faint metallic tang like old blood. I told the managers I couldn't work in such conditions, and the woman with a forced smile mentioned they had hanging lights I could use. I trudged back to my van for an extension cord, my boots echoing in the empty lobby. As I passed the receptionist, she looked up, her eyes wide. "You're going down there alone?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "If what I need isn't there, I won't be long." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound, and her next words sent a chill down my spine. "I'd rather you than me. Nobody likes going down there, not even for storage." Her gaze flicked to the stairwell door, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear in her eyes. I brushed it off. Dark stairwells weren't exactly inviting, but I'd seen worse. Or so I thought. Back in the cellar, I set up the hanging lights with the male manager's help. The shadows retreated silently, revealing a chaotic tangle of cables snaking across the walls. There it was, the distribution point I needed. But it was an ancient solder block, useless for modern broadband. I sighed, realizing this job would take longer than expected. The manager showed me where the office fitters had left the cables for the clients, neatly coiled in a cupboard behind the receptionist's desk. At least that part was straightforward. I got to work, testing lines, my tester beeping rhythmically in the silence. By 4 p.m., I tagged the cables and confirmed most were viable. But I didn't have the blocks I needed to finish. I switched off the lights, locked the cellar door, and signed out at the desk. The receptionist gave me a strange look as I left, her eyes lingering on the stairwell door behind me. On my drive home, I called my manager to explain the situation. I might need help tomorrow, I told him, unsure if the exchange had even been prepped for this job. The unease from earlier lingered, a faint hum in the back of my mind, but I pushed it down. Just another day. The next morning, another engineer called to say he'd join me for the day. We split the tasks. I'd work in the cellar, pushing pairs from the box to the cabinet, where he handled the exchange. I arrived at the building, punched in the access code, and froze. The cellar lights were on. I was certain I'd turn them off before leaving. Every single one. Had a manager come down after I left and forgotten to switch them off? The thought didn't sit right, but I had no other explanation. I descended the cellar, the air colder than yesterday, the metallic tang stronger. I worked quickly, pushing cables through, my colleague confirming each one from the exchange. Things were going smoothly. Too smoothly, perhaps. I returned to the cellar to fit the new block, drilling pilot holes into the crumbling wall. The hum of the drill was the only sound until it wasn't. "What are you doing?" A voice rasped, low and guttural, right behind me. I nearly dropped the drill, my heart slamming against my ribs. I spun around, and there he was. A man in gray overalls, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken and unnaturally bright. "You the caretaker?" I managed, my voice shaking. He nodded slowly, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Gordon. Nobody's been down here in years." I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease. "Well, I'm here now." I went back to drilling, but the moment I stopped, he spoke again, his voice closer this time, almost in my ear. "What's your favorite football team?" he asked, his tone oddly eager. I answered, keeping my eyes on the block, trying to focus. He kept talking, asking to watch me work, his presence looming just out of sight. I agreed, more to keep things civil than anything else. He said he'd been here over 30 years, which didn't add up. The receptionist had said the building was derelict for years, and the cabling hadn't been touched in at least 15. I didn't press him, but the air felt heavier, the shadows thicker. An hour later, a voice called from the stairwell. "Hello?" I waited for Gordon to answer, but when I turned, he was gone, vanished. I climbed the stairs to find one of the managers, who asked if I was expecting another engineer. I explained the poor phone signal in the cellar, and he nodded, joining me below to discuss the cable routing. We chatted briefly, and I went back to working, assigning phone numbers to pairs. Then, out of nowhere, the voice again. "Sorry about that." I froze. Gordon was back, standing in the same spot as before, his smile wider, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Clever," I said, forcing a smile. "If they can't find you, they can't make you work, right?" He didn't laugh, just stared. I told him I was heading upstairs to help my colleague and would be down soon. "It's been nice to talk," he said, his voice soft but heavy, with something I couldn't place. "I like the company." I felt a pang of pity, thinking maybe he was lonely, mistreated by the staff. "Costs nothing to be nice," I said, climbing the stairs, but as I glanced back, the cellar seemed darker, the lights flickering faintly. My colleague and I finished threading the cable through the void and into the cellar. Gordon was gone again. We wrapped up and my colleague left for lunch, promising to meet me back at the yard. I needed signatures and my extension cord, so I found the manager and showed him the setup behind the reception. I mentioned retrieving my cord, asking if the lights could stay on for now. He agreed, saying he'd get another cord in case anyone else needed to go down there. His tone was off, like he was humoring me. I descended one last time, unplugging the lights. The cellar felt different now, the air thick, oppressive. Then Gordon appeared again, stepping out of the shadows like he'd been waiting. "Didn't know these were your lights," he said, his voice low, almost accusing. "Wouldn't have touched them." My stomach dropped. The door had been locked. "You were here last night?" I asked, my voice barely stable. "Of course," he said, his smile stretching too wide. "I'm always here. It's where I'm needed." I mumbled a goodbye, extended my hand for a handshake. He raised his fingers pale and bony, and said, "Hope to see you soon." I turned away, my skin crawling, and hurried out, locking the door behind me. A week later, the control center called. A line at the building wasn't working. High priority. I returned, greeted the receptionist, and checked the cables behind her desk. An older man approached, apologizing for being absent the previous week. "I'm the caretaker," he said. "Had to take extra days off." I waved it off. "No worries, I'm sure Gordon filled you in." His face went white. "What did you say?" "Gordon," I repeated. "The caretaker said he's been here forever." He grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he said, his voice trembling. He told me the building had been a nursing home decades ago. The old caretaker, Gordon, had died on the job. His desk still in the cellar, littered with to-do lists and letters addressed to him. A sign on the door had read, "Caretaker," right by the cellar entrance. He'd seen Gordon too. He admitted, but no one believed him. "He was wearing overalls, wasn't he?" he asked, his eyes boring into mine. I nodded, my throat dry. He didn't need to say any more. I felt it. The weight of something watching, something that never left that cellar. I fixed the line, left, and never went back. But sometimes in the quiet of the night, I hear his voice, low and rasping. "Hope to see you soon." I was only 13 when the darkness began to seep into my life, a creeping shadow that clung to the edges of my mind like damp rot. The stress of school was bad enough, but it was the aftermath of escaping an abusive relationship that truly broke me. My ex-boyfriend, a predator who lied about his age to sink his claws into me, was 16, a 3-year gap that felt like a chasm at my age. He was a hulking figure, held back in school, his threats laced with venom. If I ever left him, he'd come for me. He knew where I lived. He owned firearms. The thought of him lurking out there, waiting, kept me in a constant state of dread. Even after I broke free, his shadow lingered, stalking me through social media until, mercifully, he seemed to give up. But the fear he'd instilled never left. It festered, burrowed deep into my psyche, and about 5 weeks after the breakup, the sleep paralysis began. At first, it was just the usual terror. My body locked in place, my chest heavy, as if a weight pressed down on it. My breath shallow and ragged. Terrifying, yes, but nothing compared to what was to come. My bedroom, once a sanctuary, had become a place of unease. I hated being alone in there. The air felt thick, charged with an unnatural presence that made my skin goosebump. I started hearing things, soft taps on the walls, faint knocks on the windows, and worst of all, scratches from inside my closet. That closet was a source of dread, its doors hiding an access panel to the crawl space above, a black void that seemed to pulse with malice. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, especially from that shadowed corner of the room where the closet door stood. Sometimes, in the dim light, I swore I saw a figure, a fleeting humanoid shape, dart across the opening. My parents dismissed it, of course. "You're watching too many scary movies," they'd say, or "your mind's playing tricks because you're staying up too late." I wanted to believe them, but the crawling unease in my gut told me otherwise. Then came the night that changed everything. I jolted awake in the dead of the night, my body rigid, trapped in the iron grip of sleep paralysis. My eyes the only part of me that could move, darting frantically around the room. The air was wrong, stagnant, heavy, like the breath of something ancient and malevolent. My fan, which I always kept pointed to me to drown out the silence, was off. I knew I turned it on before bed. I told myself I must have forgotten, my exhaustion clouding my memory. But deep down, I didn't believe it. Then I noticed the closet door. It was ajar, just a crack, but enough to send my heart racing. I never left it open, not anymore, not with the way it made my skin crawl. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the silence, and I strained to see into the darkness. That's when the smell hit me. It was his cologne, the one my ex doused himself in, sharp and cloying, but twisted now, corrupted. It was as if the scent had been seeped in decay, mingled with the sickly sweet rot of a dead animal left to fester. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. Tears stung my eyes as the realization sank in. My worst fear had come true. He was here, in my house, in my room. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped, a prisoner in my frozen body. My eyes scanned the shadows, desperate to find him, to confirm the nightmare. Then I heard it, a soft thud from the corner of the room near the closet. My heart stopped. Gathering every ounce of courage, I forced my eyes to focus on the darkness. At first, there was nothing but shadow. But then, something moved. A tall, hunched figure, barely discernible, crouched in the corner like a predator waiting to strike. Its form was wrong, unnatural, draped in a tattered cloth that seemed to writhe in the dim light. I tried to scream again, but only a faint gasp escaped, a pitiful sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. The tall figure turned, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring my fear. Its back was grotesquely bony, the vertebrae jutting through the thin fabric like jagged spikes. Its hands, its hands were skeletal, the fingers elongated and tipped like claws that glinted faintly in the moonlight. My eyes strained to make sense of it, to find some human feature to cling to. But when I focused on its face, my blood ran ice cold. It had no face, just a smooth, featureless void where a face should have been. A blank expanse that seemed to drink in the light. My sobs came harder now, silent, but racking my body as the creature began to move toward me. The smell grew stronger, an unbearable mix of death and that cursed cologne, suffocating me as the thing approached. It moved with an unnatural grace, its claws scraping faintly against the floor. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything. But I was trapped, a fly in a spider's web. The creature reached my bed and, with a slow, deliberate motion, climbed onto it. Its weight pressed down on the mattress, and I felt the air grow colder, my breath visible in the freezing room. It straddled me, its bony frame looming over me, and I sobbed harder, my chest heaving uselessly. Then it reached out, its claw wrapping around my throat, tightening just enough to mimic the way my ex used to scare me. His hand around my neck, squeezing until I begged for mercy. The memory flooded back, raw and vivid. That time in the school library when he nearly strangled me, his eyes gleaming with sadistic delight. The creature's grip tightened and I felt the pressure, real and suffocating. I leaned closer, the faceless void inches from my face, and it spoke. Its voice was a low, guttural monotone, an imitation of language that sounded like English, warped with a distorted lens, as if I had heard human speech but didn't understand it. The words were incomprehensible, a mockery of meaning that made my skin crawl. The room grew colder still, the air heavy with the weight of something ancient and wrong. I was on the verge of passing out, my vision swimming, when suddenly it stopped. The creature released my throat, stood, and glided back to the closet. It slipped inside, the door closing behind it with a soft click, as if nothing had happened. I gasped, my body finally free, and scrambled for my phone. The screen read 2:45 a.m. Tears streamed down my face as I stumbled out of bed, still shaking, and ran to my parents' room. I threw open their door, sobbing and hyperventilating, barely able to form words. They woke with a start. Angry at first, but their expressions softened when they saw my state. My dad demanded to know what happened, and I choked out the story. The figure, the smell, the hand around my throat. He tried to dismiss it, repeating his tired lines about my imagination. But then, his eyes fell on my neck. His face paled. I followed his gaze and saw them. Red, raw abrasions circling my throat, the unmistakable marks of a hand. He grabbed his gun, stormed into my room, throwing open the closet door. Nothing. The fan was on, humming softly as if it had never been touched. But the smell lingered, the foul mix of cologne and decay, and I saw my dad's nose wrinkle as he caught it too. He didn't say much after that. He muttered something about my imagination, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see it in his eyes. He was shaken, maybe even scared. He refused to talk about it, brushing off my questions, but I knew he believed me. At least a little. That smell, those marks, they weren't just my imagination. Something had been in my room. Something that wore my ex's cologne like a twisted mask. Something that knew how to mimic his cruelty to torment me. I've never had another sleep paralysis episode since, and I pray I never do. But even now, as I sit on my bed writing this, the air feels heavy and the shadows too deep. The closet door is closed, but I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, waiting just beyond the veil of reality, ready to step through the moment I let my guard down. I can't prove a single word of what I'm about to tell you. No recordings, no faded photographs, no scraps of evidence to thrust under your skeptical gaze. All I have is my word, whispered into the void like a confession to an empty confessional. But I swear it's true, or at least I cling to that belief with the desperation of a man dangling over an abyss. Once, the thought of it all terrified me, gnawing at my sanity like rats in the walls. Now it brings a twisted sort of comfort, because if my story is real, then the world isn't the sterile, predictable cage we pretend it is. There's something more, something ancient, hungry, and watching from the shadows. Something that slips through the cracks when we least expect it. But enough preamble. Let me drag you into the darkness with me. I was a blissfully ignorant child, the kind who chased fireflies into the twilight without a care for what lurked beyond the glow. My family never quite grasped my odd fascinations, the dusty tomes of forgotten myths, the whispered tales of creatures that slithered between words. But those quirks were my sanctuary, a private realm where joy bloomed and unchecked. Puberty crashed in like a storm, twisting everything. Suddenly, girls weren't just classmates. They were enigmas, pulling at me with an invisible force that left me breathless and foolish. I've never regretted the time I poured into those pursuits. Each heartache carved the lessons into my soul, sharpening me like a blade. But the first time I truly fell, plummeted really, into love, that was a descent into madness. She appeared out of nowhere, or so it seemed. One mundane afternoon, she was just another face in the crowd, unremarkable as a shadow at noon. The next, she was everything, a radiant phantom that haunted my every waking thought. Her appearance didn't matter. Her flaws were invisible to me. I saw her through a veil of obsession, a hopeless romantic willing to shatter my world for a single stolen moment in her presence. I'd risk it all. My pride, my friendships, my fragile sanity. Of course, she didn't feel the same. We were close, though. Agonizingly so. We lingered together, teetering on the edge of what if. Her casual touches igniting false hopes that flickered like dying embers. I fed on those scraps, starving yet insatiable. Then came the betrayal that should have ended it. She chose him, my best friend, the one I'd share secrets with under moonless skies. They became an item, and in an instant, my world cracked. Oddly, it only bound me tighter to her, a noose of longing that choked out reason. Him? I erased him from my life. His name turned to ash under my tongue. To survive the apocalypse of my teenage heart, I buried myself in distractions. That's when the occult slithered in, uninvited yet irresistible. Perhaps it was my lifelong love of horror, the creaking floorboards and ghost stories, the chill of urban legends, or the fables that had nursed my imagination. Whatever the seed, it sprouted fast, dark vines wrapping around my mind, rituals, spells, candles flickering like accusatory eyes. They became my confidants, whispering promises in the dead of night. Time dragged on. They broke up, but she still didn't choose me. Worse, she was moving away, ripping the last threads of hope from my grasp. Devastation hit like a physical blow, leaving me hollow. But a broken mind doesn't wallow. It schemes. I delved deeper into regional lore, Eastern European traditions, a toxic brew of pagan rites and Christian dread. Exotic curses mingled with familiar prayers. And at the heart of it all loomed the devil. Not the biblical Satan, mind you, but something older, slyer. A being not wholly evil yet dripping with malice. A trickster that bartered souls like cheap trinkets. Dangerous? Undoubtedly. Foolish for a boy like me to toy with? Absolutely. But grief blinds us, doesn't it? I decided to summon it. The ritual was deceptively simple. Light candles. The wrong color, as it turns out, but ignorance is no shield. Chant ancient words that tasted like rust on my tongue, and prepare the bindings, a red string symbolizing its tail, a stone to house its essence. As long as I held them, it would obey. Lose them? It would unravel my life, thread by thread, with gleeful abandon. A fair trade. I thought, in my delusion. I hid the stone among my books, where only I would disturb the dust, and pin the string beneath the foot of my bed, a heavy, immovable sentinel in my solitary room. No siblings, no pets, no prying eyes, foolproof, or so my arrogant mind decreed. Mid-ritual, as the flames danced like mocking spirits, I faltered. What did I want? Her love? A day of forbidden bliss? Her staying put? Happiness untethered from her shadow? My thoughts tangled, a web of desperation. In a moment, my childish folly, I blurted, "Make all my wishes come true." The words hung in the air, silly and weightless. I finished the rite, feeling nothing but a faint embarrassment. It was play acting, like the dragons in my storybooks. I stashed the items and slept, the whole affair forgotten by dawn. The next day, she called. Back in 2008, cell phones were clunky relics, calls a luxury we rarely indulged. She'd never phoned before, never wanted to. But there she was, her voice a siren song, asking to meet. Just us. We spent the day together, a haze of laughter and stolen glances that felt too perfect, too orchestrated. Confidence, I told myself. But the luck snowballed. Opportunities bloomed like poisonous flowers. Joys piled upon joys in a surreal cascade. It was the golden hour of my life, bathed in unnatural light. Then, realization crept in, cold and insidious. It had to be the ritual. No other explanation fit the improbable string of fortunes. I crowned myself a master of the arcane, basking in the glow while ignoring the encroaching shadows. But darkness always follows the sun. One afternoon, I returned home to a violated sanctuary. My grandmother, bless her oblivious soul, had cleaned my room, displaced the stone, removed the string. Panic clawed at my throat. I scoured the fledgling internet for remedies, my heart pounding like a trapped animal. The advice? Expose the stone to sunlight, then hurl it into a church courtyard. Forget it ever existed. I did, but the die was cast. The entity was free, and its vengeance was a slow, savoring poison. She moved away. A final twist of the knife. Nightmares slithered in first. Vivid horrors where loved ones morphed into monstrosities, their eyes bottomless voids. The best friend turned feral, betraying me with inexplicable rage. We'd been inseparable since childhood. I'd pulled him from the brink more times than I could count. And now, he snarled like a beast unleashed. We're close again, but he remembers nothing of that madness, as if it were erased from his mind. Then death struck. My great-grandmother withered away, followed swiftly by the other. Legal serpents coiled around our property, forcing us out. I left behind my room, the cradle of my memories, the only place that ever felt like home. Cherished friends, familiar streets, all vanished into the ether. We relocated to a half-built monstrosity of a building where electricity rebelled like a living thing. Lights flickered and died, plunging us into the abyss. I descend into the basement, a dank, whispering tomb, to reset breakers, flashlight beams slicing through the gloom like a feeble prayer. Twice in the pitch black. I broke my own legs fumbling with shoes, bones snapping under inexplicable force. Laughter? Feel free. But the pain was real. A cruel joke from the unseen. Loneliness gnawed deepest. Friends faded like ghosts. Visits rare as mercy. I was adrift, sustained only by the loyal few, their presence a fragile lifeline. And then, the present. No spectral figures, no crackling voices, just an oppressive weight, thick as fog. It thrived in darkness, especially after power outages, when my flashlight was my sole ally. I hoarded them, in my backpack, on the nightstand, even the bathroom. Talismans against the void. In the black, it hovered inches from my face, breath hot and foul, promising a jump scare that never quite came. It fed on my misery, growing fat on despair. I deserved it. I knew I'd invited it in. We moved again, fleeing the chaos. Normalcy teased, but the eternal returned, bloated and bold. I jolt awake, gasping. Room walls scrawled with black symbols, twisted runes mocking my impotence. At first, terror consumed me. Then numbness set in. I'd glare at the marks and roll over, forcing sleep. But it evolved, creative in its cruelty. One night stands as its masterpiece, a symphony of dread I recall with unwilling admiration. I'd spent the day lost in a beloved book, words a temporary escape. Dusk fell, morphing to inky night. Footsteps echoed below my window, soft at first, then insistent, like claws scraping stone. An animal? I convinced myself, but they grew bolder, drawing near. Brave, or foolish, teenager that I was, I ventured out, with flashlight in hand. Nothing. Emptiness mocked me. Back inside, the steps resumed, closer, taunting. I read on, fiending defiance, until sleep claimed me. At 4 a.m., the door creaked open, the handle loose, wind's plaything, or so I'd always thought. I lay still, back turned, sighing at the interruption. Then the door clicked shut. Footsteps, inside now, padded from door to desk, inches from my bed. My chair dragged out, wood groaning like bones breaking. Something sat. Fingers drummed the desk. Tap, tap, tap. Impatient. Summoning. Witness me, it seemed to hiss. Fear me. Feed me. Terror paralyzed me. Hours blurring in frozen agony. Nature's call finally forced action. Turn, I whispered to myself. Face it. What's the worst? Death? It's already killing you slowly. I spun, heart thundering, visions of horns and fangs flooding my mind. The room was pristine. Door shut, chair tucked, emptiness leering. Relief washed over me. I stumbled to the bathroom, relieved myself, splashed water on my face. In the mirror, I looked haunted, eyes sunken, skin pallid. Something wrong. Behind me, on the tiles, blood. A fresh splash, crimson and accusing. I whirled. Red blood, thick and warm. No prank, no siblings, no intruders. Family checked, all asleep, unharmed. I scrubbed it away, heart hammering, lest it alarms others. Morning inquiries yielded nothing. No injuries, no explanations. Calm followed, a deceptive lull. Moves continued, each final one a lie. The dread ebbed and followed, and I armored myself with distractions. Books, rituals, anything to drown out the whispers. One night, after a day of exhaustion, the symbols returned. I snarled defiance, rolling away into nightmares. Loved ones evading, twisted with black eyes and jagged grins, devouring my peace. Waking symbols persisted. Rage erupted. I shouted into the void. Enough! What more do you want? Protective spells spilled from my lips. I washed my face, returned to draw sigils, wards against the unseen. Get out, I commanded, opening the door. The air shifted, heavy presence lifting like a receding tide. Nightmares lingered, dread whispers, but it's mundane now, like anyone's shadows. Recently, a dream revisited the symbols. Waking clear walls brought relief, tinged with paranoia. I lay vigilant till dawn, listening for the tap, tap, tap. I still devour occult tomes, savor cultural curiosities. Another summoning? Unlikely, but if I'll know the entity, specify the wish, guard the bindings with my life. Strangely, I'm grateful for the horror. Life's monotony is a true terror, knowing the veil is thin, that something hungers beyond. It invigorates. I can't prove it, but believing means there's more. Vast, unknowable horrors dreaming us into existence. If that doesn't chill you to the bone, keeping you awake in the small hours, well, perhaps you're already lost to it. I've always prided myself on being a skeptic, the kind who clings to logic like a lifeline in a storm of shadows. It's woven into my bones, this compulsion to rationalize the irrational, to dissect the impossible until it crumbles into dust. But even skeptics have their breaking points, moments when the veil thins and something insidious slithers through. I've had more than my share of those brushes with the unknown, encounters that linger like a foul breath on the back of my neck. Tonight I'll drag two of them into the light, though the telling makes my skin itch with unease. I'll start with a milder one, the appetizer before the feast of dread. It's shorter, less visceral, but it plants the seed of doubt, whispering that the mundane can hide horrors so seamlessly you don't realize you're dancing with the dead until they've already claimed your hand. Back in South Africa, between 2009 and early 2011, I endured the stifling confines of an all-girls private school, a place where conformity was etched into every brick and deviation invited whispers like knives. Life there was a quiet hell, a suffocating routine of uniforms and rules, but nothing prepared me for the chill that awaited in the music room one fateful morning. I had a free period, a rare sliver of solitude, and I chose to spend it in wrestling with my Baroque piano piece for the exam. Our music program demanded 8 grueling hours of documented practice daily, and I was far from mastery. I slipped into my favorite room, the door creaking shut behind me like a reluctant confession. I threw the deadbolt with a satisfying click, sealing myself in to ward off interruptions. The air was thick, with the scent of polished wood and faded sheet music, a sanctuary amid the chaos. But as I lifted my gaze from the keys, I realized I wasn't alone. Perched on the windowsill, silhouetted against the pale morning light, was a girl about my age. She wore a plain yellow dress, a stark contrast to our violet floral uniforms that screamed conformity. Her hair cascaded freely down her back, another blatant defiance of the dress code, and she stared out the window with an unnerving stillness, as if the world beyond held secrets too terrible to turn away from. The room felt heavier suddenly, the air pressing in like unseen eyes. Gingerly, I approached, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the floorboards. "Excuse me," I murmured, my voice tentative. "Do you mind if I use the piano, or are you planning to?" She didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge me at all. It was as if I were a ghost to her, invisible and insignificant. I assumed earbuds were hidden beneath that torrent of fiery red hair, so I retreated to the piano, my fingers hesitating over the keys before plunging into the melody. The notes filled the space, but they couldn't drown out the prickling sensation on my skin, like fingers tracing my spine from afar. Time slipped away until the bell tolled, a harsh reminder of the world outside. As I gathered my things, she stirred at last, sliding off the sill with a fluid grace that sent a shiver through me. "Thanks for letting me share the space," I said, stepping closer, desperate for some connection. She turned toward me, but her eyes remained downcast, fixed on some abysmal point on the floor. I've never been one for forced eye contact. It feels like an invasion, a violation. But something compelled me to seek hers, to bridge the void. I maneuvered into her line of sight, and for a fleeting second, I caught them. Intense green orbs flecked with gold, framed by a constellation of freckles. But in that instant, her expression twisted into startled horror, and she vanished. Not faded, not stepped away, simply erased from existence, leaving only a rush of frigid air that clawed at my skin. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Every hair stood on end, my blood freezing in my veins like venom spreading. I bolted from the room, nearly colliding with my music teacher in the hallway, her concerning questions lost in the roar of my pulse. Upstairs in French class, I collapsed into my seat, my face drained of color. A classmate noticed, unusual, given how they usually avoided the weird girl, and prodded me about looking sick. In a haze of desperation, I spilled it all. The yellow dress, the silence, the disappearance. To my bewilderment, she frowned, not in disbelief, but recognition. "You haven't seen her before?" she asked, her voice laced with a dark curiosity. I snapped back defensive, but she pressed on. "That's the yellow lady." The words hung in the air like a curse. She unraveled the tale then, a ghost story woven into the school's history. Once a ladies' finishing school, it had housed a mother and her 2 children, a teenage girl and her younger brother, in exchange for custodial duties. The grand staircase forbidden to us students. They called it the big staircase to downplay its ominous grandeur, had been installed during their time. One fateful day, the girl, in her yellow maid's dress, was sweeping nearby when she tripped, tumbling down those unforgiving steps. Her neck snapped on impact, a life extinguished in a whisper of fabric and bone. I'd mistaken her for a student from a neighboring school whose uniform mirrored that yellow hue. But now, the pieces clicked. I'd glimpsed her before, drifting among the living like a shadow in sunlight. She blended so perfectly, a predator in plain sight. A week later, descending toward the music block, I heard it, sweeping, rhythmic, and relentless, accompanied by a humming that slithered into my ears like poisoned honey. It emanated from nearby, the big staircase, but as I approached, the sounds enveloped me, yet no one was there. The corridor stretched empty, the air thick with an unnatural warmth. Emboldened by madness, I whispered into the void, "Thank you for letting me borrow your music room the other day." The humming ceased, the sweeping halted, silence descended like a shroud over a corpse. Then, faint as a dying breath, a delicate voice replied, "Yes, miss." My heart seized and I fled, nearly tumbling down the stairs myself, the echo of her words chasing me like spectral fingers. There are more tales of the yellow lady, whispers of her watching from corners, her green eyes piercing the veil, but they pale against what came later. Let's delve into the abyss now, the one that still haunts my dreams, turning sleep into a battlefield of dread. In 2019, at 24 years of age, I stepped into adulthood with my very first job as a high school English teacher in what's whispered to be South Africa's most haunted city. A place where history festers like an open wound and the air carries the weight of untold atrocities. Excitement bubbled in me. but reality soon curdled it into fear. The cheapest lodging was a suite in the women's dormitory of a school for children with severe special needs. Not my workplace, but a crumbling edifice of despair. My actual school was a fundamentalist Christian bastion, where discipline meant invoking the law and students wielded violence like scripture. No one there offered guidance. I was an outsider, adrift in hostility. My suite was a furnace, always 5 to 10 degrees hotter than the blistering city outside, as if some infernal breath stoked the flames. Sleep evaded me, sweat soaking the sheets like accusations. Adding to the torment was an older tenant, a zealot who stalked me with sermons, her eyes gleaming with fanatic fervor. She smelled my budding atheism like blood and water, ambushing me in hallways to proselytize. I'd shed the chains of Calvinism, finding religion a toxic elixir, but she persisted until I unleashed cruelty I didn't know I possessed, telling her God could rot for all I care. The door was next, a maintenance nightmare in this unfunded hell. Latches failed, so locking was the only way to secure it. I made it a habit, especially to bar her intrusions. Yet, it swung open unbidden, unlocked, handle unmoving. Never when I tested it, but at odd hours, particularly at night, when darkness pressed against the windows like eager spectators. School unraveled too. A student assaulted another with a brick. I intervened, earning a bashed leg and a reprimand from the principal. That day, I spotted the first inverted crucifix above my bed. Crude, upside down, mocking. I blame psychosis, a relic of undiagnosed ADHD, autism, and panic disorder that once birthed hallucinations. Easier to doubt my sanity than admit the shadows stirred. But they multiplied. A third appeared, scratched into my window's film, distorting the outside world into a leering grimace. Then, a call accused me of devil worship, a zealot's revenge, I thought. I confronted her viciously, my doubt gnawed. Was she the puppeteer, or something darker? Objects vanished and reappeared, defying reality. Water bottles teleported across the room. A binder slipped from my lap, clattering, only to materialize on my nightstand. Papers neatly filed. The air grew heavier, charged with malice. The fire came next, charging my battered phone. A Frankenstein of old devices into the sweltering room. I woke to agony in my hand. Flames licked my rug, acrid smoke filling the air. I doused it with precious bottled water. Tap water here is poison. But turning back, the blaze vanished. Sulfur lingered, not plastic, demonic, insidious. The phone was scorched, but the rug unmarked. Sleep became a torment, exhaustion eroding my edges. Scratching erupted from the closet, ferocious like claws rending wood. I rationalized rats, but opening it revealed marks too high, too deliberate. One night, arriving home, it raged. I yanked the door open into darkness, thrusting my hand in. Something emerged, a shadowy tendril, clawed like a demon's finger, raking my arm. Pain bloomed, the scar remains, a jagged reminder, while fire marks faded. Resignation loomed. The haunting was the least of my woes. My brother arrived to move me, my relief flooding like cool rain. But the dormitory's horrors peaked. No working showers, only brown sludge. That last night, a bath worked. I submerged, forgetting a pitcher, and pressure pinned me under. Twin point on my chest, invisible hands drowning me. I waited it out, calm in crisis, but emerging. My toiletries and towel were gone. Naked, I fled to my room. My brother found them under the couch the next day, untouched by my searches. Handing keys to the matron, I probed. Had the previous occupant reported strangeness? She's been there 15 years, but her face darkened. Did the crosses show up? She asked. We'd seen one fade on the wall years ago, something inhuman lurking. The crosses had appeared 8 times, drawn in grime, scratched deep, fading as I prepared to leave. Driving away, the city shrank in the mirror, a fever breaking. Was it a demon, hallucination, or madness? I remained skeptical, but that presence, dark, insatiable, clings like a shadow, waiting for doubt to weaken. Judge for yourself, but beware. Once invited, such tales burrow deep, and the night grows ever longer. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true paranormal encounters. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership of Back to Ashes. As I always like to say to you members, thank you for your devoted support. Without you, I don't have a voice and I would be sitting here talking to no one. So thank you so much for sticking with the channel. If you are new here and you've enjoyed what you've listened to, please leave a like, a comment, share with your friends. And if you'd like to become part of the Back to Ashes family, please hit that subscribe button and set your notification bell to all. That way you'll know every time I happen to upload a video. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and please stay safe. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.